2-bedroom property is going to be a deal. So today, I got sent a property in Greensboro, North Carolina, 2328 West Vandalia Road, Unit M, Greensboro, North Carolina, 27407. For the most part, this condo, I mean, I would probably replace the carpet, but it's not a must do. The appliances are a little old. Maybe I'll replace a range just to make it a little bit nicer. But overall, I don't think you need to replace all the flooring, but it might be a good practice to do so. The paint looks fine. I mean, you probably take a look at the fresh paint. So there's very fresh paint, brand new carpet. So maybe you don't renovate it until you go through the first turn. So that's what I would generally do for this property. All right. So because it's brand new carpet, it's a little different because it's also 2 bedroom, 2 bath. So I'm not too concerned. 240 for the HOA. So let's go ahead and get the rent for this property. Now, the first thing I would do typically is I would look up the HUD FMR, but because I've been looking at North Carolina for a while now, if you just Google Greensboro Housing Authority 2025 payment standards, you're going to see right here that the 2 bedroom payment standard is 1247, $1,247 a month. I think I'm pretty you can just link to it too. And the payment standards typically also include utilities. So, just as a general rule of thumb, if you ever see the payment standards for a property and you are not going to provide utilities, in general, you have to deduct the utility allowance from the payment standard. So, let's say you look up the payment standard for a 2 bedroom property for utility allowances. So, let's look at, I think, for utility allowance. Housing Authority. Yeah, so I know they had this. So, for example, this is a good one. If you're in Boston, oh, this is really new. If you're a 2 bedroom apartment, that's a 2 bedroom thing, and you don't provide heating and they use gas, and you just deduct $117 from your heating, from your ceiling rent, that's typically what you would do. Now, after you make the deduction, then you decide, hey, that's my maximum rent that the housing authority will allow me to pay. Otherwise, what you want to do is you can go to affordablehousing.com, go to the market rent estimator, plug in the address because once you plug in the address right here, it's going to give you the market rent. And the reason you want to get the market rent and compare it with the housing authority's payment standards because of a test called the rent reasonableness test. And you can see right here that the rent for 8 bedroom for 8 units within a 0.22 mile radius is $995. That's actually really low, right? Really low. I had a friend in North Carolina told me that he just bumped his rent up to 1250 for a renovated unit. So I'm gonna analyze this deal using 995, and I'm gonna use it using 1250 just so you can see how big of a difference it is and how you can determine whether or not a deal is a deal for you. So let's go ahead and do this. So the asking price right now is 115 grand, 115000. Your rehab for this property, I'm going to just replace, I don't need to replace the AC. I am going to replace two of the toilets with high pressure flush toilets because that's what I have in my other rentals, and I've never gotten a clogged toilet before, so I wanted to keep it that way. I'm gonna keep the range and range it to replace that. I don't. I think the refrigerator was fine. Not gonna not gonna put in a new washer dryer. Not gonna put in a new cabinet. I mean, it looks perfectly fine. I'm not gonna put in new flooring because it's brand new carpet, and I don't need to paint the place because it's got fresh paint already in the entire home. So that being said, typically I put aside 1,500 bucks for the roof, but in this scenario, I'm in an HOA. So the HOA typically has monthly fees that is intended to cover the overall larger capital expenditure items, such as the roof. So that gives me total rehab for this property of about 3 grand. Now, for this property, I'm gonna get the taxes right from the Redfin payment calculator. So I'm gonna scroll down over here, and you guys see the property tax is 63.45 for insurance. So $63 for property taxes, and for my insurance, I'm gonna put in 45. US 45 times 1.2. That's because I'm assuming that $45 estimate is for a property that someone is typically using for a primary residence property. And if I'm using it for an investment property, that's why I'm multiplying by 1.2 by adding a 20% premium. So $54, great. for my maintenance. I got 5% of my rent set aside every single month because I have a much bigger HOA fee every single month. So $50 every single month I go towards maintenance, something that I know I'm gonna have to do, right? If I have my own individual AC unit, if I have my own water heater, eventually that's gonna get replaced. So I gotta put that aside every single month. All right. Property management, I got 8% for property management. Sometimes it goes up to 10%. So just be very mindful of that. And I got 5% for my vacancy expenses. So I got 8% right here. Sometimes it goes to 10%. And sometimes folks will say, hey, I'm just gonna self-manage the property. And that's okay. But if you have partners, let's say you're managing the property on behalf of the partnership, it's very suitable for you to pay yourself something for the work that you're doing overseeing the property. That's very, very typical. But if you don't underwrite the property with property management expenses, then essentially you have bought yourself a job, right? So just be very mindful of that. Yeah, it's great to self manage so you understand what it takes, but maybe at some point, if you can put in the margin in here for property management, because otherwise you're never going to be able to step away from that position. All right. So for down payment in F19, I'm going to put in 25% right here, and my down payment is going to equals to my B4, which is my asking price times my down payment percentage in F19. That gives me a 28.75K. For my principal insurance, I got B4 minus my down payment. So my listing price minus down payment. So I'll be financing 86 grand. So if my interest rate right now is 7.5%, after it all flushes out, I would be, if I rented out this property as a 2-bedroom property for $152, that would make it a negative 152 cash flow a month with a cash and cash return for minus 5.7. Assuming I bought this property for 115. All right. With a $3,100 rehab. Now I'm gonna write down the payment standards that I had here that I looked up. 1247, and then the 3-bedroom 1607. Greensboro payment standards. Great. All right. Just write down these numbers because my partners already know how to analyze these deals. So that's why I'm doing this. So they can quickly reference how I got these details when the time comes. Don't care about 4 bedrooms today because I'm only looking at 2 bedroom, and there's no room to add any more bedrooms on this property because it's so small. So on this property, let's say my target return is 8%. How would you adjust numbers up and down, right? Assuming your rent is 995. So let's say my target return is 8% cash and cash return. If I go to $90,000, $70,000, $60,000, $62,000. Great. So I would have to buy this property that's listed for 115 for $62,000 because I can only rent this property out for 995. Okay, that's a big difference. Yeah, I'm gonna cash flow 126 a month with a cash and cash return of 8%, but it's not very realistic, right? Because it's almost half the price. So now, let's say my friend is correct and he just got rents for his 2-bedroom condo up to 1250 based on a certain standard. What would that take? Now, how much can I afford to pay for this property? $95,000. How about $92,000? 93. Great, that still qualifies. So that's the difference, right? If you have proof from another friend, another investor in this area that's getting not 1250 a month for a 2-bedroom condo here, you can cash for 172 a month, and now that's a 7.8% return. But now you're able to afford paying extra $31,000 for this property. And that's what I want to share with you. Okay. That's what I want you to observe and understand and figure out what is a deal for you. All right. Again, this is not investment advice. I'm not soliciting any investments on this call. Right. If they have proof, that's generally it. But in general, right, be very mindful of the rent reasonableness test. If you ever look up the Housing Choice Voucher Program Guidebook and you go to section 2.2, why is that jumping? So weird. In this section called comparability, there's a test where it says in conducting rent reasonableness, the PHA or Public Housing Authority must determine whether the rent to the owner is a reasonable rent in comparison to rent for other comparable unassisted units. So obviously, in determining comparability, the size, the unit type matters. So you got to compare two-bedroom apartments, two-bedroom apartments, two-bedroom condos, same thing. So be very thoughtful about it, right? Because a three-bedroom apartment is going to rent very different versus a three-bedroom single-family home. But in this scenario, I'm assuming that all these 8 units within a 0.22 mile radius are, in fact, rental apartment. Okay, I'll help you in 5 minutes. Okay. Okay. So now that we got these deals in place, let's say my interest rate dropped 1%. So if it goes from 7.5 to 6.5%, see how the cash and carry return just jumped up? All right. So now that the interest rate dropped a full point, what happens? Now you can go up by nearly 7 grand on your purchase price and still achieve the same target return of 8%, simply because your interest rate dropped from 7.5 to 6.5. All right. With a $3,100 rehab and $100,000 purchase price, still renting out for two bedrooms, 1,250. But now you're able to cash for 186 a month and still achieve a 7.9% return. Okay. So the last thing I want to cover with you today is the 10-year yield versus 30-year mortgage interest rate chart. Now, the reason I want to share this with you is because the 30-year mortgage interest rates are affected by two things. Primarily, it's affected by the interest rate on a 10-year treasury yield and the 30-year mortgage interest rate. Now, historically, that spread has been about 1.5 to 2%, but you can see it's gone as high as 3%, which is a lot, especially when there's a lot of uncertainty. So, if you ever see any headlines where they are now seeing properties that are coming onto the market, I mean, tariff deals that are coming onto the market now, those are the signs of de-risking in the market, right? As the market understands that there is less conflict there, then they're going to figure out, okay, well, maybe, just maybe, there's more predictability and now the spread narrows. So if the 10-year yield drops half a point and the spread narrows by half a point, you really can get a 1 full point drop overnight. So this is why it's so important for you to figure out, don't listen to just the headlines, follow what the 10-year yield is doing and follow what the 30-year mortgage interest rates are doing on a daily basis, because that's the difference between your ability to adjust up and down your offer right away. All right. So I hope this was helpful, everybody. My hope is this. I hope you analyze the same deal, analyze today using the same spreadsheet. If you go to affordablehousing.io, you can get a copy of the spreadsheet and then get deal analysis tool. Put your name, your email, phone number. That's the fastest way for you to get a copy of the spreadsheet. That's it. All right. I hope you all have an amazing Saturday. I hope you all spend some quality time with your family and friends today, because that's what life is all about. So I'm gonna go hang out with my family, and I hope you all have an amazing weekend. Thank you so much for joining in the live for 617 days in a row. I appreciate you all. Have a good one, everybody.